Hi everyone, this is my review of Anora. This new film was just released wide after getting a lot of a hype at film festivals. It's directed by Sean Baker, stars Mikey Madison. I really love this movie, and first of all, I'd like to say everybody should see this movie if you're curious about that. Support Sean Baker, who's a filmmaker who's really curious about people who are really on the margins of society and whose lives are neither kind of glamorous escapism or so horrifically tragic that they belong in a kind of Oscar bait movie about slavery or war or something like that. He's really kind of curious about hustlers, about people who are trying to make a living in this current economy. And he's made a movie about a 25-year-old girl from Brooklyn. She's a Russian American girl, lives in Brighton Beach, and she works at a strip club. And her hopes get kind of raised pretty early into the film because this very wealthy guy, really immature person, one of the most spoiled people we've ever seen. I mean, he grew up in Russia, but he comes over to America. Um, he's ridiculous. His name is Ivan. Calls himself Vanya. He kind of gets her hopes up and offers her a lot of money to accompany with him across the country for a week. And the movie has a lot of the kind of scenes of like a screwball comedy or a mismatch kind of comedy or like a young lovers on the run in paradise. Tonally, it actually feels a little bit like Badlands, the first Terrence Malick movie. Although Badlands is really kind of meditative, very slow moving, lots of shots of wheat and open fields, and wondering about the meaning of life and how to fill your life with people and places that you remember. It just is a very different movie tonally. I mean, the second half of this movie feels a lot like After Hours or one of the crazy New York City like comedies of the 1980s or 90s with people zooming around in their trucks and crashing into little ice cream shops and running into bars and yelling at other people and getting in arguments about, whose accent is worse and, how much this person hates Armenians and this person hates Russians and this person hates, wasps and all this kind of stuff. So they're very different movies, like tonally by the end, but they share that DNA at the beginning of this kind of like lovers who think they're in paradise, and then you know how naive they are from the first time you set eyes on them, and they kind of slowly find that out as they work their way through this, beautiful plan to get married, which the two main characters in this movie do at one point. I found this movie really effective. It's certainly my favorite movie of this year so far. I think what makes it work so well is this performance by Mikey Madison at the center, who is just, not a movie star, not a major actress up until this point. She had supporting roles in a couple of movies, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream. Here she's given a lot to do. She has to be a really witty, sharp, kind of street smart survivor. She also has to be kind of naive lover and romantic to some degree. She has to be like a shrewd negotiator. She has to be this kind of relentless fighter when people come in and try to kind of close her life and put her back in this box in the outer boroughs in Brooklyn that she was at the beginning of the movie. And she just fights relentlessly physically against that. She screams about it for minutes on end. She has to do so much, and by the end, I felt so connected to her character in a way that only a truly, truly great actress can do. Um, you feel deep empathy for her. It's clearly that Sean Baker feels deep empathy for her. And I personally wasn't quite rooting for her to, get married to and live a life with this kid Ivan Zakharov, who's from this kind of Russian oligarch family, which has just billions of dollars to toss around however they want, because their life is so kind of absurd and vacuous and materialistic, and he is such a silly young he's not a man, you know. He says he's 21. Who knows if he's lying about that? He might be 17 or 18 or something. He acts like a boy, and I don't think her life would be happy with him. Um, so it's not like you're rooting for her to be with him, but you're rooting for her to kind of realize her self worth. Although this movie even interrogates that, you know, I personally like don't. I think of being a sex worker as kind of a slightly demeaning position, and I respect sex workers. I don't want to stigmatize them, but I do think it's something that ideally people should work their way out of, and that they should only be vulnerable and show that kind of like physical love to somebody who they truly love, and do it for something other than money. Um, I I definitely believe that, and I was hoping um, this little tryst and this like week off with her getting paid $15,000 at the beginning, but it seems like she's going to get more and more money, would give her the opportunity to take control of her life and, you know, lead it somewhere happier. And so maybe I was rooting for something a little different than what most people will be while watching this movie. They might just want to see the lovers on the run and living in some like ridiculous kind of mansion bought with Russian money in Long Island or in Las Vegas or on, you know, the California coast or something. I was just really curious about her. Um, and I think anybody, but especially people, you know, who live in the east coast of America, who don't have any money, who are in their 20s, all of which describe me with Russian ancestry, which also describes me, can really, really relate to this main character, Anora. Um, I hope anybody could relate to her, though. She's such an interesting character. She's so prickly, even towards the end of the film. One of the people she's met along the way, met pretty unpleasantly. He kind of violently restrained her and tried to, you know, make some decisions in her life for her. He's kind of one of the Russian thugs. Um, she's really harsh to him, and in some way you can see why. But it's also, even when he shows her real kindness and offers money, and um, she just doesn't. She can't open up. She's so angry about what's just happened, and I think she's a fascinating character. To some degree, she feels a little bit like the Barry Keoghan character in Saltburn, which is a really bad movie, and this is, you know, 20 times the movie that is. But that's kind of like a British version of this, although that character is actually middle class. She feels a little like him in the sense that she's so um, envious of people with money that she starts just thinking about it nonstop, and every decision in her life becomes purpose towards that, which is tragic, but it's also deeply kind of empathy building. And again, I felt so much for her. The filmmaking here is just phenomenal. I mean, a lot of the sequences are really fun. A lot of them are set to like music, whether it's Take That, the British band, or a lot of like 2010s kind of girl pop, like strip club songs, you know, dance songs. Some of them with pretty crazily explicit lyrics. So it's a really fun, transgressive movie, and I can't say enough about it. I think I'd love to watch the second half again. The first half, now that I know how it ends, I just find the Ivan or Vanya character so annoying. He's such like who I would never want to be as a young man. He's so shallow and vacuous and pretty irritating to watch. And I wasn't a fan of him. I don't know if I'd like to see another hour of him spend that first half of this movie with him again. But there is real brilliance in the second half of this movie, and the acting throughout is phenomenal. Um, it's a deeply American story. Obviously, it's a story of what having a kind of rigidly stratified class society does to people at the bottom of that society, how kind of envious and it brutalizes them. It makes them brutal. Um, it makes them uncompromising and vicious and jealous and nasty towards other poor people and then towards richer people. And so it's kind of it's a movie about the aftermath of a long you know, problem of economic inequality and the door being closed to anybody who doesn't have kind of educational credentials or anything. Um, it's a it's a deeply American story. It's a story that can apply to a lot of class-based societies. I think America, even though we think of it as so horrible in the class-based sense, and as really regressing away from the golden period of the mid 20th century when there was a thriving middle class which occupied most of the population. There are plenty of other countries which have even much worse class societies in which it's much harder to ascend, and in which there's no even pretense by wealthy people that they care about contributing to food pantries and homeless shelters and programs for underprivileged kids to help families climb out over the generations of poverty. So I'm not saying America is the worst class-based society in the world, but I I think the way this movie presents, when you see side to side Anora's life in Brooklyn, in Brighton Beach, kind of right by the ocean, as far away from Manhattan as you can get, just shivering in her little apartment that's right under the subway, and waking up at night because the subway's going past. And then you see the lives of this, spoiled young 20-year-old guy from Russia. Um, and then you see how they interact, and it it is one of those movies that raises a lot of questions, like what is love other than two people meeting under the right circumstances? What's love other than somebody seeing something that's advantageous to them? Are 21-year-olds even capable of love? Like, are they mature enough to be in love, or is the guy just kind of ravenous for female flesh, and the woman just kind of you know happy to have somebody who can take control of her life and who wants to do things for her and spend money on her and so on. It's such an exaggeration and a satire of that. Like, the characters are so shallow in some sense of what they want from each other, and it's so extreme in that direction of the woman wanting this money and this, like, just take me away, make all these decisions for me and throw these parties for me, give me this like expensive ring, and the man just wanting sex constantly. It's such a satire of that I think it's either kind of affirming that that's true and showing that it's true by you know allowing us to spectate on how people behave when they have unlimited money, and when she's like very beautiful young woman who doesn't have any money and what she'll do in that circumstance. Um, or it's not a satire of that, but it's kind of querying whether there is deep love between them. And I think by the end of the movie, I'd come to a conclusion about that. But it's something that will keep you guessing throughout the whole movie. What's going on in each of their kind of internal life, and what they're thinking, what they have planned next. Um, the movie's not very violent either. It doesn't really go for horror movie type scenes, which I I'm grateful for. I don't like horror movies. But the other movie that I thought a lot about was Parasite, the movie about a family in Asia, just a couple years ago, and I was never as high on that movie as most people were. I think that's like a 3.5 or 4 out of 5 star movie. This is a 5 star movie, and maybe it's just because it takes place in Brooklyn, New York, a place I know well. It's an American movie, um, and so there's like a cultural difference there, and I couldn't relate so much to this kind of experience that seemed very rooted in the class system of Japan or Korea or Taiwan, um, and it was drawn from different family stories and different friend stories of Bong Joon Ho's, connections and the inspiration he was writing that story from. Um, I, I don't know why I responded to this movie so much more, but I thought Parasite was pretty overrated as a movie. I thought it like literalized and made violent its whole premise by the end of the movie in a way that was pretty counterproductive. And I just thought this movie stayed with one character throughout the whole time and had such deep insight into her, and avoided over the top violence, and it was so refreshing. I mean, it's one of those movies that energizes you as you watch it. And after seeing so many kind of paint by numbers, um, kind of pity party movies about real life tragedies, Oscar bait movies, after seeing British period dramas that are feel like all the other British period dramas, after seeing these kind of nihilistic like European art house movies, after seeing the superhero movies and all these different genres of movies. This one, which has such empathy for the main character, but is so honest about the brutality of the world out there for young women, but just for people without money, all over the world, but especially in New York, America. Um, it's incredible that combination of empathy for this one main character and getting an actress who is so willing to put herself out there, and then total honesty. So it's not a silly movie that reassures us that everything's going to be all right in the world, that everybody's going to have a happy life, because that's just not true. A lot of people work really difficult jobs and are constantly striving to make more money, to be comfortable, just to be warm at night. And this movie knows that. It dramatizes that well. And it's my favorite movie of the year so far. Anora. This was a great one.